I am delighted to announce that the speakers arrived. They're a little bit wet. They were hardly rain. Um, the taxi driver brought them to front of Canal-Centre Pompidou, so you had to walk that. But anyways, I'm really pleased to invite on stage Kasia Redisz, who is the artistic director of Kanal-Centre Pompidou, and thank you so much for allowing us to organize this program. Over to you.
Thank you, Chantal, and welcome everyone. I will just read this because it's one of these Tuesdays, each feels like 5 days. So welcome everyone to K1. It's a temporary space of Kanal-Centre Pompidou, which is the building that you see on the other side of the channel, being built as we speak. There's 300 people working there every day, making it way for us. Today Milan the second Afield Forum Brussels. Afield Forum is centered on artist-led initiatives grounded in long-term social engagement and collective action, which really resonates directly with Kala's ambition to implement values and practices of the commons, which are at the core of our institution. This past Sunday, during the Journée de Chantier Ouvert, so the day of open construction sites in Belgium, our still unfinished building welcomed over 3,000 people in just 5 hours. And I must say that seeing the space coming to life, populated by its audiences and future users of the space, gave us not only a great boost, but made it very tangible, the belief that we work with artists, with you, for our constituents, for our audiences who represent the society that surrounds us. The belief that culture alongside its institutions can impact social change led Kanal to launch a long-term collaboration with Afield last year. During the inaugural forum last year, we debated socially engaged practices. This year, we celebrate and highlight artists whose work contributes to social justice. The building of Kanal will open on the 28th of November 2026, so please save the date. And we really hope to become a place where social engagement in art is not only discussed, but also practiced. The events such as this one pave the way to future programming and contribute to our thinking about the institutional models. The ALP creates a space called transdisciplinary conversations that blur boundaries between art, activism, and community work, which is in line with our mission to become a city Brazil rooted in the social local context. Like last year, I would like to thank our colleagues at Afield for their trust and also their generosity in accompanying us in our thinking process. And this year, Afield at the Kanal joined forces with Kunststelle Festival des Arts. I also thank for our many collaborations. I also congratulate on a fantastic edition this year. Thank you to the Team Kanal and Gregory Castella in particular. He today wears a double hat of Afield founding member and Kanal head of the Lyric of the Commons project. And last but not least, thank you to all the contributors, artists participating in the program over the next couple of days. I hope to see you again at the forum, which we will hold in one of our extremely comfortable and cozy auditorium buildings in 2026 or early 2027. Have a great afternoon and great work on this. Thank you.
That works. So I'm joining Chantal. My name is Sandra Terdjman. I'm the co-founder of Afield. And it's with a lot of emotion and gratitude that Chantal and I are inaugurating the Afield Forum on Transitional Justice by Artists. And to start, the two of us would like to acknowledge the moment we live in. Many participants here today have lived through a war, through bombs, displacements, the loss of loved ones, friends, and family. For many in this room, the countries we'll discuss in the coming 4 days, whether it's Colombia, Peru, Congo, Sierra Leone, Syria, still resonate with personal and traumatic experience. For too many, The wars in Ukraine, Sudan, Palestine are not distant matters, but daily reality. And like many of you this evening, we're wondering, what can art and justice do when a genocide is taking place in front of our eyes in Gaza? When innocent civilians, families, and so many children are displaced, targeted, and starved? When international laws are not respected, mocked? If international justice seems irrelevant to answer immediate despair and stop the war, it is still the hope that one day justice will be made and that it will not only punish but reconcile. If arts sometimes appear as not equipped to respond to such violence, it is, however, thanks to the resistance of civil society, grassroots activists, artists, and especially those who have been closest to the hostile atrocity, that justice is fought for. And so it's with this difficult reality, contradiction, and aspirations as in mind that you feel for effect, please. Awesome. Transitional justice encompasses a diverse set of processes to move towards justice, reparation, and peace after large-scale violence, oppression, war, and armed violence. This process, though it seems to be encapsulated in its concise term, is far from linear. It is iterative and imperfect, often ongoing for decades, and may never have a clear ending point. And we'll hear a lot more about this over the next 4 days. It is sometimes opposed to or challenges retributive justice. Retributive justice is based on punishment and criminalization. It is embedded in the legal order, aiming to uphold a rule of law and moral order. Transitional justice, however, aims to address the root causes of a conflict, centering around the needs of victims and survivors. Transitional justice aims to repair. It aims to restore trust amongst communities and to transform society so it can understand itself better. It is called transitional justice because its aim is to allow post-conflict societies to transition towards a non-violent context, to forms of liberal democracy, and towards peace. And ultimately, it is about ensuring that the atrocities do not repeat. So from transitional justice, we wanted to share this definition with you as it's not so much of a common term for us all. First, in the next 4 days, we'll talk about transitional justice by artists or with artists. So what do we exactly mean? Just a bit about the genesis of the project for us. This notion was, we looked at it in 2023 with face of invasion in Ukraine, in Gaza, and some civil war in Sudan. And at the time, we're already realizing that it's precisely when massive violence begins, when international institutions are losing legitimacy and are falling, that informal groups, and artists especially, are stepping up with urgency to respond to gaps and needs. And they document, they collect material and evidence, protesting, bridging communities. And so at the time, this research was started with Open Society Foundation, and with conversation with Afield members, and especially Alejandra, Ballón, Gutiérrez, and Farid Rakoun, Alejandra is here with us tonight, Jesaj. And in 24, so the year after, we started a conversation online on that topic with many of you actually while sitting in your room. And we then launched an open call for grants. We're able to support different projects on that topic again. And in the amount of proposal we received, we decided with the team that it was necessary and urgent to dedicate the farm topic this year on transitional justice. So what we learned during this research for the past 2 years is a little sort of compass we wanted to share with you, and maybe, thank you so much, John. We sort of started to map a little bit the different practices that we're looking at in these 4 categories, which are obviously intersectional, find it. So one is about documenting, connecting evidence, archiving, so-called truth funding. The other one is about representation, storytelling, the ability to narrate and re-narrate, so truth telling. The third one being more about memorialization, the act of commemorating together. And the last one is about restitution and the economic, cultural, and environmental restoration. It's more about building the infrastructures, institutions to allow that. And so in the next 4 days, you'll see different practices, more than 20 or 40 artists who are navigating those different practices, and why they're so meaningful for the contribution to justice and transitional justice specifically. It's because when they're done by artist group, they're often very grassroots, they're situated, they're community-based, they're politically driven, and they're produced by the ones who are closer to the harms. And in that sense, they deserve, I would say, a lot of attention and an expertise. For those of you who don't know us, so I'm just going to do a quick introduction to Afield. So Afield was created 11 years ago. We have Kasia and Sandra, founding members, as a network and a grant-making program to support and celebrate artists from all disciplines who have created long-term social and environmental human rights initiatives. Today, we at Afield represent a community of 120 artists from all disciplines from over 30 countries. We're an active community. We host member-led study programs, online workshops to strengthen one another's practices. We host regular meetings, sometimes just to check in on each other, especially with members who live amidst ongoing conflict. And we also meet to shape network activities and make decisions together. In the last 2 years, we have been actively creating opportunities to meet in person, from trips visiting initiatives by fellows to large-scale public events like this. So this Afield Forum, as Kasia mentioned, is a 3-year partnership. It's an international gathering that sheds light on the role of arts in society and the unique value of ideas and solutions by artists that contribute to social and environmental justice. It is a regular meeting point in Brussels with local and international audiences, thanks to the partnerships with Kanal-Centre Pompidou, Kunsten Festival des Arts, SIVA last year, and the incredible support of Terra Foundation for American Arts. Last year, as the inaugural year, we explored system change by artists, which was a mapping of practices from diverse contexts. And this year, we zoom in on artist practice contributing to something more specific, a field practice called as transitional justice. It is with great excitement and gratitude, and probably some headiness and brief, that we open this forum, bringing so much hands-on knowledge and courage into one array. Over the next 4 days, more than 40 artists, collectives, lawyers, and journalists will share methodologies and ideas. So the program, I'm going to do a quick summary of the program in case there's some people who haven't seen it, takes place in 2 main venues, Dashkarboom, and that's in collaboration with Kunsten Festival a little bit more, and here, which is a partnership and shaped with Kanal-Centre Pompidou. There are 4 workshops every morning simultaneously that allows people and public to interact deeply with one practitioner and address tactics and practices, and panels and keynotes in afternoons and evenings to contextualize these practices. There's reading programs and performances that allow the public to really be in the presence of art as art is doing its work. And if you haven't already, I encourage you to read through the full program. It's very rich. And the QR code for the full program is downstairs on the big screen in the entrance. So I would now like to thank, and I don't know if you just want to wave your hand, our team. Olivia, I don't know if she's here. Anya, he's over there. Alia, Pierre-Antoine, Alexia, who are in the space. So if you need anything, you can come to us and ask questions, or you need support because these are heavy topics, and also approach us. And Abby is not with us in person, because he's celebrating a personal life achievement. It's with Saturday, which is Saturday. What's the personal life achievement? With his great materials. Information about transitional justice was shared with us by Jussi Opolokov, who's going to be moderating on Friday morning, Rosemary Buikema, who is an academic, and Alia Jorge, who is part of our team. Special thanks to our strategic board and facilitation group, Diana Campbell, Gregory Castera, Taeyun Choi, Mimi Brown, Aisha Dem, Alisa Silva, and another, I'm almost cracked up in the thank yous, but immense thank you to Kasia from Kanal-Centre Pompidou, who's been supporting us from last year for that. Francesca Rose and Sharon Forwin from Teo Foundation for American Arts. Danielle Blanco-Dubé from Prusse Festival des Arts. And Luhan from Open Society Foundation, who's trusted us, all of you, from the very beginning. It is a field of belief that artists are fundamental to society as thinkers, visionaries, and change makers. And this convening with all of you on this journey with us, our hope is to invent and shape together, build from the bottom up, an expanded imaginary of justice in a time we seek to really be losing faith in justice. As we invite our co-hosts Alejandra and Joseph to join us on stage for the next part, he would like to end with a quote by Justice Albie Sachs, a renowned South African lawyer, activist, and former judge of the Troop Commission in South Africa, who is, for many people, an embodiment for the fight for justice. And he knows this for Joseph, that he means in a mascot to you. And the transition of South Africa from oppression to democracy, who has never given up and reminds us that art should be seen in post-colonial, post-apartheid Africa as a practice that transcends politics and continues to produce new beginnings by performing the ambiguity and contradiction of historical events in a way that tribunals and truth commissions cannot. Art can be expected to be multi-layered and therefore deal with the ambiguities and history. And with that, I invite Alejandra and Jason to the stage. So this is a bit of a two-part conversation, and I'm going to first speak with Joseph, and then Sandra will speak with Alejandra for about 10 to 15 minutes per person. There's a lot to cover, so I'm going to jump into it. Joseph Kaifala, who's I'm honored to call a friend, and I'm very grateful you're both here with us on stage, is a Sierra Leonean lawyer, writer, and historian. He's the founder and principal of the Center for Memory and Reparations, facilitating remembrance and collective narratives around the Sierra Leonean Civil War. Joseph is also the founder of the Geneva Project, which provides educational opportunities to adolescent girls at Sierra Leone. He works in areas of international law, transitional justice, human rights, and education. He currently serves as the commissioner and chairman of Sierra Leone's Monuments and Relics Commission. If I understand correctly, we play the video first. Please.
The Sierra Leone Memory Project is an oral history project dedicated to recording testimonies of former child soldiers, amputees, rape victims, and all those who lived through the violent civil war that occurred in Sierra Leone from 1991 to 2002. It aims to serve as a platform for justice, granting an avenue to the voices and experiences of those who were most affected by the war and continued to be most vulnerable in society, such as the youth, who were often recruited as child soldiers. This documentation of oral histories forms a part of the larger Geneva project, through which senior fellows, Joseph Kaifala, and Liat Kravchuk have been involved with several reconstruction initiatives in Sierra Leone for the last several years, thus far realizing schools, libraries, and providing scholarships to academically motivated secondary school girls. The testimonies are meant to provide a meaningful framework to publicly explore the traumatic memories of political violence, debate difficult questions about human behavior and choices in difficult circumstances, highlight the problematic nature of rigid victim and perpetrator labels, and ultimately to provide future generations of leaders with powerful lessons about the importance of human rights and democratic values in preventing intolerance in violent expressions. In addition to recording testimonies, the project sought to expand its reach through an educational symposium. The symposium brought together over 400 secondary school students to learn about the Civil War, understand the parameters of memory and remembrance in post-conflict settings, share experiences, and discuss ways of creating sustainable peace in the country. The aim was to present the young generations with an opportunity to discuss the Civil War and all of its consequences, in order to foster young leaders that are aware, able to discuss and learn from their past and paving the future. Ultimately, the project is premised on the idea that confronting the horrors of the past will help prevent a repetition of similar atrocities.
And then I also forgot to mention that not only is Joseph all the things that I mentioned, but he's also a poet, which is also why he's on stage in this. And we'll take a moment for him to share a poem at the end. So as the lawyer in the room, do you think you can help us understand what a truth commission is? I think that's a term that many of us will recognize more than transitional justice, what a truth commission is, and then at the same time, give us a bit of context in Sierra Leone and the role of the Truth Commission within the Civil War after.
Right. Good evening, everyone. I tried my best this evening not to be late because I didn't want to feed into a southern stereotype of a late applicant. But my taxi driver was lost. So he spoiled. But I'm glad here. This is a very meaningful conversation, and I'm glad we're having it. The idea of truth commissions come out of the basics of transitional justice. Of course, transitional justice, you had the definition earlier, is a response to systemic and widespread human rights violations, right? The fundamental part of transitional justice is truth commissions. And of course, when you hear transitional justice, the justice part of transitional justice is often now there. A truth commission, of course, then is the non-judicial independent panel that is set up to deal with the systemic violence and widespread violence in societies. Now, it's very important that it's non-judicial. It's not a court. But there are elements that are important to commissions. And one of those elements is, of course, it's independence. When society decides to set up truth commission, they have to accept that it is going to be an independent body that cannot be manipulated by any power there be. And also, it ought to be credible. And that would often involve the people who are on that panel, so that there cannot be any questions about its credibility. And this comes out of fundamentally what the South African Commission did for the rest of us. It started by choosing a very credible leader. Desmond Tutu of you don't guess Tutu should research it correct. The moment he became the head of the South African Judicial Reconciliation Commission, the whole world thought this is going to be credible. And Sierra Leone followed in that footstep by choosing another ready, Joseph Humper to lead our truth commission. Now, coming into the Sierra Leone sense, Sierra Leone went through decade of civil war, starting in 1991. And the civil war lasted so long that it became quite messy. You know, the line between perpetrator and victim became blurry. I'll give you an example. Children were conscripted to fight the Sierra Civil War. They end up committing horrendous crimes. Now, after the war, it was difficult to determine whether those children were victims or perpetrators. Yeah, we have this complex situation now. So therefore, when the Sierra Leonean Civil War was declared over in 2002, starting with a peace agreement in Lomé in 1999, they had to decide what they were going to do. A decade of civil war with nuances. How were we going to prosecute anyone? Or were we going to hold responsible? And this is the fundamental part of transitional justice and truth commissions. The world has now realized that international justice, for instance, cannot resolve certain issues after mass atrocities. And therefore, in Lomé in 1999, our president at the time, the international community, after looking into the whole aspect of the Sierra Leonean Civil War, decided that perhaps criminal persecution is not going to help this country recover. So as part of that treaty, the country agreed to set up a Truth and Reconciliation Commission. And that is how we ended up with a Truth Commission. And therefore, immunity was granted to all warring factions. Now there were certain changes later because the rebels at the time refused to even conform to the agreement that they did in Lomé in 1999. And therefore, the president at the time, Terdjman, wrote to Kofi Annan, who was the Secretary General of the United Nations, requesting to set up a special court. This was a treaty court. It's not an international criminal court. It was an agreement between the government of Sierra Leone and the United Nations. But even that, there were limitations. Its mandate was to hold responsible those who bear the greatest responsibility, which was a very small number of people. And therefore, everyone else was supposed to go to the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. So now the commission collected thousands of testimonies from both victims and perpetrators. They had to fight as much as possible to separate the link between the International Criminal Court that was set up and the commission. And this is where its credibility and independence was imposed. Those who testified to the commission had to feel that they weren't going to be arrested after their testimony and taken to the criminal court. And that had they spent a lot of resources going on the country explaining this to people first. In the beginning, folks were afraid. If I testified as a Chad soldier and say I did X, Y, Z to certain before their deaths, am I not going to receive summon to the International Criminal Court? So we had to make sure that was separated. The commission did a fantastic job. They produced volumes of report. What happened to whom, where, when, who did. Both victims and perpetrators, everyone participated. And then it was also mandated to profile recommendations, not only to give us a report of what happened to us, why, but to tell us the things we can do to make the country better. And that is the important aspect of truth commissions. We ought to take action after the commission has done its job. And those recommendations are there. They divided into various categories, encouraging recommendations, work towards, etc., etc. That also included the question of reparation, which is very fundamental to each commissions as well. But our TRC said that everyone was so affected by the conflict, directly or indirectly, that this country doesn't have sufficient resources to provide material reparation to everyone. So it created I think, 4 or 5 categories of victims that were to receive material reparations: child soldiers, rape and sexual assault victims, amputees, other war wounded, and children of those who were going to be affected by the conflict. For the rest of the country, it's recommended symbolic reparations to facilitate what it described as collective healing. So the Center for Memory and Reparation, which I set up a few years ago, was then to deal with the symbolic reparations aspect of the TRC recommendations. But we had to make sure that these symbolic reparations were not just a repetition of what people were doing elsewhere. We ought to find out what creates meaning, what creates healing in our society. So you have to go back to communal setting in the society itself to find out what people do when they were so hurt and they wanted healing. One of the things we realized that traditional burial rites are fundamental parts of Sierra Leone society. But most of us didn't have the chance to bury those who we lost in the war because we ourselves were on the run for our own lives. So one of the work that the center does is go around the country, identify, map, and protect mass graves left by the conflict at sites of countries. After which we provide resources for the communities where these mass graves are located to conduct traditional burial rites as a way of healing. And this is what we do.
I might ask for you to state it, because I was going to ask about the Sente, but you've already answered that question. So, would you mind sharing one of your works with us?
Not at all. I think the problem always is what to share. So yes, see. Again, often when we are dealing with difficult topics, I'm an optimistic person in spite of the very difficult issues that I work with in my country and as national human rights. So often when I have the chance, I like to make the mood lighter so that we realize that we're all seeing difficult situations around the world, some of which we never thought would really get. And often we feel very impotent to do anything about these issues. However, as an optimist, I believe that it always gets better. It always does. And as Nelson Mandela told us, it is in our hands. So while we may not all be able to stop what is happening in Palestine, Sudan, and other places, we can use our resources that we here to always make sure that these places are not forgotten. We can remember those collecting, documenting, and taking evidence. If we don't have these things, we cannot move forward. So at every opportunity, I try to make the room lighter. However, again, it's very difficult based on what I deal with. But today, for this moment, I would choose a poem I wrote some time ago. It's called Kako. Laugh a good laugh. Expand the facial curvatures into a canvas of joy, flattening the undulations of pain in defiance of knotted ends. The curse of pain and sorrow conquered with careless leverage. The remedy for those whom language beneath the yoke of life's challenges, like a bird caught in a hurricane seeking refuge on a pole. If the pole is all there is at present, don't think life has no glories. Let your jaws shift and cackle like the laughter of an idle witch in the silence of her mystic chamber. Let your sweet tears roll to the beat of your heart. Exorcise the demons that clench your lips, allowing your vibrant laughter to subdue the most potent sorrows. Laugh a good laugh, and let the coolness of your tears refresh your weary soul, and infestors who may be altogether resigned to enduring pain.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Joseph, for the wisdom. And so I will introduce Alejandra Ballón Gutiérrez, who has also different hats as a visual artist, an activist, but also an academic. You're now a doctor. You have a PhD in social anthropology and ethnology. And your artistic and academic work has evolved around women's rights and their representation for a long time. You're an Afield member since, I think, 2015, roughly. For the work at the time you've done with three women and leaders from the Shipipo-Konibo community. Since a few years, you've been also working with women who were sterilized by force under the dictator of Alberto Fujimori. And it was in the 90s. And we also realized that it was roughly the same time that the Sierra Leone and Peru had the Truth Commission. And you fought for the justice of more than 300,000 women who were sterilized at that time. So, Alejandra, can you bring us to those years, to the Truth Commission at the time, or the transitional justice process in Gao, and maybe how the women were forgotten as a process?
Well, thank you, Sandra, for the introduction, and thanks to everyone here. I guess this audience is an audience that cares. So I'm very glad to be a part of Afield's also. They are very, very generous, and they are they have a very truthful solidarity heart. So it is a pleasure to work with you every time it's gonna wait. So yes, through commissions in Peru, we underwent internal armed conflict from the 1980s until 2000. And we had a loss of 70,000 people, more than 20,000 disappeared or missing until today. Of course, these are official records, right? It should be greater. And there were 300,000 forced sterilized women, who were most of them from rural origins, indigenous, native, considered to be economically poor, and mainly Quechua or native languages speaking. So the thing with the Truth Commission, which the final report came out in 2003, this final report omitted the 300,000 women who were forced sterilized. They didn't count them under the research of the Truth Commission. So even though we have a very important Truth Commission that gave us light under the most obscure time of Peru at the moment, they missed this, they omitted this. Why they did that, that's a question that we are still trying to understand. It is dialogue, because it's not easy to do this when all the apparatus of the human rights agreed that it's not part of, right? So we consider it was a genocide, it was a crime of less humanity, and it was a crime of war. I mean, forced sterilization under the Statute of Rome comes under this, fits into these three. There are academics that are fighting for this to be considered as a reality. So and it has advanced on that edge. Now there's almost a consent that this was an invisible genocide occurring the wounds of the women. The thing is that Joseph was talking about how important it is that the truth commissions should be independent, right? The thing is that the forced sterilization in Peru was possible because USAID implemented a lot of money and did this bilateral accord, state bilateral accord, United States and EU, to make this state program, national state program, where all these women were finally sterilized. So this bilateral program came with the money from the United States, so from USAID, right? And USAID also was part of the ones who implemented the Truth Commission. So wonder why forced sterilization was not part of the, considered under this Truth Commission. The problem is that after the Truth Commission, they implemented the plans for reparations, right? The national plan for to reparate victims. And forced sterilization couldn't get in. And they don't have any type of reparation. And it's been now 35 years from we already had the last audience with the International Court of Human Rights 3 days ago. So we are waiting now for the sentence of the court.
And perhaps we should show your film. An exit of your work that you talk about it.
En desigualdad están haciendo lo que han sido antes y lo que ha pasado entre los libros y los cuerpos legales que es lo que ha sucedido en la estoy para decir. Eso es lo más importante porque yo la realidad es que está leyendo las señoras de esterilización y por favor de antes tales otros que son los mismos pasos que está pasando está haciendo bárbaro para que como un recuerdo que no se va a olvidar, ¿no? Si es que se va a conservar es volver que sea en otro sitio como una casa de museo hasta eso pero nosotros pensamos no se dice encontrar de tiempo al se está bien. Me ha gustado bastante, estaba leyendo su vida que ha pasado en estos años que hemos tenido idioma. También se abogaba bandera como porque esto la vida anterior que ha vivido y también de la literatura. 3 etapas que están dando, ¿no? Nuestra bandera. Antes se la puedo olvidar, pero después de la literatura, que en su opinión, que en el feminismo, en la comunidad, y hasta ahora siguen luchando de sus alumnos. Cada uno tiene su vida, cómo ha vivido antes, cómo ha sido cada día después de la literatura que está a su realidad, lo que han vivido.
So the objects or these works are called collective visual testimonies. Can you tell us a bit about how they contribute to a healing process for these women at the time, and how do you imagine it contributes to a form of reparation in the long term?
Well, so there are many ways in which art can, enter on transitional justice to try to put on social justice back to the victims, and sometimes even during the crime is committed, not after. It could be simultaneously. So So that's something that it's quite strategic for artists. Artists can be there in the field in the moment and could be also testimony of many of these cries. In the case of working with forced sterilized women in room, I have to say that from these 300,000 women, we calculate only 10% were sterilized by the state with legitimate consent, and only 30% had complete reformation. Just to because we are now working to have a special truth commission only for forced sterilization. That's what we just demanded to the court. So in the working with them, it has been for years now, decades. I think art can be acknowledge cultural horrors. For example, when I was working with them, I started to understand that the consequences were not only physical or emotional or psychological or economical, of course political, but that they were cultural forms of the crime that affected, right? Because, for example, women, many women who are indigenous in Peru in the Andes, they weave, loom weave, and they have to make an effort to put, which is a very pre-Inca traditional form of culture, right? So they have to put on a force into the wall, and they can't continue to do that after the operation. So there were also very huge cultural consequences. So acknowledge cultural horrors and afflictions. I discovered this when I was trying to work with them, an artistic practice. So,
And some of them had not used the loom since 27 years, no?
yes,
And they're excluded from their community because not only they cannot have a family, but they cannot transmit the knowledge of this tradition.
yes. Victims are, many of them, they don't talk to their families, the horrors they have been through, because as you can imagine, women, they want to have children. They are not demanding as Yoruba women or as Occidental women or to have family planning. They need more children because of the land, working the land, and because of their culture. So they didn't demand for this. So to be a woman not capable of having children, it's a curse in the community. So they've never talked. Many of them, they've never talked to their daughters if they had ones before the operations, or to their husbands even. The husbands, they leave the women, right, or the family. So because there's no more sense, if they don't have any children, they have to go somewhere else. So the consequences are like huge, and art can, can intersect to try to, for example, in workshops with women, of artistic workshops, that we've tried to connect the family, right? So that the victim can speak to their families while doing these collective practices of well helpers and mothers, or even also not only women, also sons or granddaughters, only children. So it amplifies, art also has a very powerful tool to amplify the voices of the victims, because the art can travel. So for example, if a visual testimony is made by them, and then it could be spread and it could be diffused, because they live in very remote spaces, faraway spaces, so they can't communicate. And of course, there's a language problem, right? So art is a bridge. So it can connect with society.
And maybe we can actually end on this. Where do you think the work could be presented. You talked about an exhibition, maybe in Lille, in that later happened. This year, I have 2 exhibitions in this museum, which is called the A Place of Memory, Tolerance, and Social Inclusion, which was one of the recommendations after the Truth Commission. So we built this huge museum for the memory of the armed conflict. And I had 2 exhibitions this year. One was about forced sterilization, the case on forced sterilization. And the other one was the case of the recent massacres that occurred in Puno, Ayacucho, and Apurímac, and other parts of Peru, but I only worked with them. So, and they just suddenly changed the director of the museum, and all the program of this year has been completely canceled. And they don't even respond to our emails. And we are undergoing now a very difficult political moment. We had 6 presidents in 5 years, and our human rights are just going nowhere. The actual government is trying to step outside of the Statute of Rome, the court, and everything. They just don't want any reparations. So now it's very hard for artists, of course, for the victims, artists, also, but mainly for the victims and for the ones who are seeking truth. So art can, also be. I would like to remember the words of a poet, which is called César Vallejo, who said, "We must stain our hands with humanity." So I think art can help us in that way.